There's a lot of reasons we film videos.
What?
Sophie, you just take a video and take a lot of selfies at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
We film to remember a moment, to remember a place, or maybe a funny idea we had. It's only ever in hindsight that we realize we filmed to remember a person.
I want to get in the picture, though.
What a great picture.
The voice you heard at the end, asking for a picture, was Jonny. It wasn't my video. Most of the time that I knew Jonny, I had a flip phone, and by the time I got my iPhone, he and I had drifted apart. It wasn't that we weren't friends anymore, but we weren't connected at the hip during youth group or summer retreats the way we used to be. Unfortunately, he and I never got the chance to rekindle our friendship the way it was in middle school, around that time the video was taken. Jonny took his own life in November of 2020. I have so many different memories with Jonny, and some of my best memories from when I was that young are with him. But oddly, whenever he pops into my thoughts, one of the first things that comes to mind is not a memory of me with him, but a memory of the perfect description someone gave of him. It was at one of the memorial services, and I remember this person getting up and reading out the last text message he ever sent Jonny. I don't remember the whole text, but the part that stood out to me the most was the end, where he said, "Stay golden." I love that phrase, and it's become the first thing I fall back on to describe my friend. He was golden. His smile, his kindness, his sense of humor, it was all golden. I have no idea who sent that text, and I've been disappointed with myself for 4 years that I never thanked that person for giving me such a wonderful description of my friend. The more I reflect on that regret, however, the more that I realize it's not too late, and the only thing I have to do to course correct that regret is find him. This is The Hunt for Gold. If there's anything I've learned from consuming detective media, it's that every good investigation starts at square one. Some squares have more information in them than others. My square one has a memory of a memorial, a kid standing up, of whom I don't remember any discernible features, and the final line of his speech. That's not a lot. That's barely anything, actually. So my first step is to collect more information. And there's only one person I thought of as a place to start.
And at that point, I consider Jonny like a legend, like a god. And so I was like, this is the coolest person I've ever met in my life.
This is my younger brother, Ben. Him and I grew up in the same youth group at our church, which means we both have a lot of fond memories of Jonny. But unlike me, who had Jonny as a peer, Ben saw Jonny as the older kid who just oozed coolness. And what's a great way to make you look cool to my younger brother when he knew Jonny? Be strong and wrestle.
From like 5th grade to my 8th grade year, Jonny and I would arm wrestle every single weekend at church. And the weeks that we didn't arm wrestle, we would actually wrestle.
Ben tells me that as he got older, the skill gap began closing. And the closer my brother got to beating Jonny, the more his confidence grew. That confidence, though, was tested in high school when my brother was invited over to Jonny's for wrestling practice. Jonny had gotten a new wrestling mat, and he had chosen my brother as his sparring partner.
I have never been so demoralized in my life because Jonny just went to town. And I'm like, how have you gotten so much better in the last month? Through the past 3 years, I've been working my way up to beat you. And in that moment, I realized that from 5th grade through all of middle school, he was able to humble himself and put aside his pride to make it seem like we were in closer standings. And I just find that one of the most impressive characteristics ever.
Ben and I talked for a little under an hour about Jonny, going back and forth on stories we remember and situations we have different recollections about. Ben tells me a story about the first time Jonny called him a friend. I tell a story about how he had to create a special rule in one of our games to get Jonny to stop doing handstands. It's a fun way to spend an hour, but it's also sad. But it's these stories that keep Jonny, golden. Which brought me to the next question I had for Ben. I have some of those memories too, the really random memories that kind of stick out. And one of them is actually after Jonny's passing at the memorial. Do you remember that memorial. It was the W&T night. We all sat in that large circle. Can you tell me a little bit about what you remember about that night?
I think one of the most pressing emotions that night was, I think, frustration over grief. I think for a lot of people, there was frustration of, like, man, this community already is different. Jonny was indescribable by even the people that knew him. The extent of how I just explained him was kindness and loving and welcoming, and that doesn't even breach the surface of the emotions that Jonny brought to the people that knew him. And so the night of the memorial at our youth group, I think just the feelings were, man, even we can't really describe what Jonny was like, and having a memorial service for him, it just doesn't feel right. There was too much of him to grieve.
Yeah, I agree. I remember that I felt like I needed to write something down. And so I wrote a short little poem that was very bad. But I felt like there was so much happening. There's so many emotions that I felt like I wanted to get something down that really spoke. I found the poem in my notes app. I remember I had written something about Jonny's broken arm, and when I searched for those words, there it was, dated for November 2020. It didn't take many lines before I was transported back to that night. Unfortunately, it's not a good poem. Like my brother said, there was too much that night. There was too much going through my head to write anything down that stood the test of time. I think that's one of the reasons why the golden text was so impactful for me, because it said something I wasn't able to. I love to write, and when my own words failed me, someone else stepped up to the plate. We were all sitting in the circle with the microphone, and there was a kid that took the microphone, and he said, when I found out that Jonny had passed away, I sent him a text. Do you remember that?
In essence, yeah.
Do you have any idea who he was?
The friend?
Yeah.
No.
I was expecting that answer, but the no was still disappointing. That is, until Ben pointed me in a direction I hadn't even thought of.
I think Karen would definitely know.
Karen is Jonny's mom, and she's a reoccurring character in many of my memories with Jonny, as I'm sure my mom is for those who remember younger me. And so, with my new lead, I did nothing. I was scared. It had been at least a year since Karen and I had seen each other, maybe longer, and I knew that if we were going to sit down, it was going to be a hard conversation, and it wasn't really one that I wanted to have. What did I even have to say? I was fully ready to abandon my project. And then my brother asked me if I wanted to drive back home with him over the weekend. This was several weeks after our talk, and I knew that I had to say yes. This was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And so I finally asked Karen if she'd talk to me. Hey, Karen. It's Ethan. I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you would be available this upcoming Friday or Saturday for a sit-down interview for a podcast. And then, 2 days later, I got a text. Hi, Ethan. It's great to hear from you. Please forgive the delayed response. I read your text and simply forgot to reply. I'm happy to chat with you and hear how you're doing. And so, with the meeting confirmed, I took a step into square two. I'm currently on my way, driving to interview Karen, and I am very nervous. It's just been so long since we've talked. I feel like there's a very good chance that this is intrusive. I just don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. And, I'm just nervous about the questions that I have, and if this goes well, and if I get anything from it. I was able to wallow in my nervousness for a little under a half an hour as I drove to the house. It had been years since I'd had a sleepover there, and the only respite I had from my nerves was the fact that despite only ever being driven there by my mom, I was able to retrace the steps and find the house without directions. It was a small victory, But as I drove up to the yellow home that I remembered like a childhood friend, a twinge of excitement began emerging.
How's it going?
Hi.
Good to
Sorry,
see you.
I was like just right.
No, you're totally
You're
good.
welcome. I was trying to get off 17 pounds of dog hair. I think I might.
How's it going? Long time no see.
It was good to be back.
One of the things that we know about Jonny was that he had such a passion for loving other people.
This is Karin explaining the motivation behind the Johnny for Good hashtag and the account that gets reactivated every November.
We were really blown away just with the messages and the notes and the cards of how Jonny inspired and helped people. Another friend of his was like, I'm only alive today because Jonny helped me survive ninth grade. And so I think that knowing that Jonny did so much good, we felt like that was a great way to honor his memory. It's also so good for us to realize that people haven't forgotten Jonny. I walk with a group of moms every Thursday who've lost their kids to suicide. And one of the hardest pieces is wondering if anybody remembers.
That answer about forgetting caught me off guard. I've thought about Jonny more than any childhood friend I've ever had. But a little while later, when I brought up another memory about Jonny that I've always been curious about, this idea of forgetting suddenly took a new shape, one that I began to understand a little more clearly.
This is more of just a question that I've been wondering about. Is I remember at the memorial, you had the playlist going of songs that Jonny really liked. And there were so many Disney music on it.
Oh my gosh.
I had no idea that he enjoyed Disney
You didn't
music.
know that? Have you never seen the video
No.
of Moana? I have to find the Moana video and send it to you.
She did end up sending me that video, and it's wonderful. The focus in Johnny's eyes could melt steel as he danced around his house. Hanging from his chest is a tablecloth that Karin's mom had gotten from South America. It's the perfect encapsulation of the COVID shenanigans many of us performed. It's a side of him that I knew very well for many years, but also, at the same time, it's a side that I really didn't know anything about. And it's odd, looking back at the friend I knew and seeing a side of him that eluded me.
He was definitely a very multifaceted person. I think that was the beautiful way that he could connect with so many different people, was because there were so many different sides to him.
That was Jonny to a T. He could find common ground with the wall if you asked him to. One minute he was a wrestler, the next he was into video games, Disney, or Gaga Ball. It's not just the fear of forgetting Jonny as a person, it's the fear of forgetting the hundreds of ways that made him unique. It's easier than we would like to forget the minute details that make us human. But it's far from inevitable. At the end of the road, if you kept on driving past the Ulig's house, there's a park. And in that park, there's a bench with a dedication. Karin recites it from memory.
Rest, find hope, and know that you are loved. And I think that when we can be authentic with just one person, you will know how loved you are.
Unfortunately, Karin wasn't at the specific memorial service I'm currently investigating. I knew she wasn't going into our meeting. Karin had texted me a few days earlier, making sure I had tempered expectations of her helpfulness. She did give me a handful of names to check up on and promised that if they didn't pan out, she would reach out to a couple more of Jonny's old friends. But after I'd thanked her for that information and her time, after I had turned off my main microphone, she started thinking out loud about where she had heard Golden Boy before.
Like the stay golden part. It's funny, I wonder. That's like a reference to Jonny Ponyboy in Outsiders.
She got up to grab her glasses and sat back down before beginning to read a section of the book Outsiders by S.E. Hinton.
Here, Jonny urges Ponyboy to remain gold or innocent. Jonny now senses the uselessness of fighting. He knows that Ponyboy is better than the average hoodlum, and he wants Ponyboy to hold on to the golden qualities that set him apart from his companions.
After thanking Karin for her time and allowing us to sit down for an interview, I began sending out a flurry of texts, hoping to get one step closer to finding out who this mysterious texter was. Hi Marissa, I hope you're doing well. I was hoping you could maybe help me out with a project I'm working on. Hey Sophie, long time no talk. I hope you're doing well. Hey Joshua, long time no see. It's Ethan Rauschkolb. Hi Kira, I hope you're doing well. I know this is a long shot, but I was hoping you could maybe help me with. I'm trying to track someone down. I got a text. I actually remember this, and I remember that phrase. I'm pretty sure it was this guy named Eli who was in our year. He went to Centennial with Jonny and I, and then went to Boulder High with me. And then, she sent an Instagram profile. I've never been so nervous to send a text before. Hey Eli, we've never met before, so I understand this is all gonna sound weird. I'm doing a project, and I was hoping you could help me out. Back in middle school, I was friends with Jonny Ulig, and when he passed away, I attended a small memorial service at Calvary Bible Church. At the service, I remember someone getting up and reading the last text they sent Jonny when they found out about his passing. It ended with, "Stay golden," I believe. I was asking Ella, who I believe you went to school with, if she knew who that was, and she pointed me in your direction. Let me know if this was you, or if it wasn't, maybe you know someone else who might. Thanks, Eli. I appreciate you taking the time to read this, considering the odd nature. No worries at all. That was me. I had found him.
Hello.
How's it going? It's Ethan.
Good. How are you?
This is Eli, an old friend of Jonny's, and the author behind the golden text.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Why don't we just go ahead and start by how did you know Jonny?
Well, I knew him for a really, really long time. His family moved from Texas, I believe, in 3rd grade. So I met him the summer before 3rd grade at a reservoir camp where we would go on boats and stuff. We were really good friends there. And then I had no clue, but then he showed up in my class in 3rd grade and I was so happy. He became friends with all my friends, and then I pretty much just knew him throughout elementary school and middle school, and we became really, really close in middle school. He was in my orchestra classes. He was best friends with one of my best friends, and he was just very intertwined in my life in so many ways until, he went to Fairview and I went to Boulder High, and that's sort of when we started to part ways, I guess. There's just so much in that time that I knew him that I don't even know how to explain how I knew him,
So what was it like when Jonny came to school and started integrating into the friend group? Did he mesh really well?
Oh yeah, he was just this fun-loving, bright person, and he was weird, and I was weird, and my friends were weird, and we just vibed really well. There was a good amount of time in 3rd grade through maybe even 5th grade where we would hop around like frogs across the entire playground. Yeah, he integrated really well.
And so you guys were friends from 3rd grade to, you said he left for high school?
Yeah, around 8th grade. We were still friends throughout that time. It just became harder to see him a lot and harder to, have as close of a relationship just because I wasn't seeing him every day. And there are parts of that where, of course, guilt comes up, but I try not to feel that way because there's no reason to feel guilty about any of the memories I've had with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I not quite the same as you and Jonny, but I had a similar relationship where I moved to Colorado my 5th grade year, and then we started going to the same church. I think it was the summer in between 6th and 7th, I think.
And so him and I were at any church event basically inseparable.
Yeah.
And then high school hit, and he started inviting his high school friends to WNT, and him and I kind of drifted apart. And I feel the same way, where it's like we were still friends, but we were not that close. And it's difficult sometimes to fend off that guilt because, like, what if, you know? So you said in your text when I texted you that you felt that you knew a different version of Jonny because you knew him earlier than high school. What specifically about your relationship with him makes you say that?
I think that in late middle school, it's kind of when kids are all learning about themselves and learning about what they're feeling, and maybe they feel different, maybe they feel misunderstood, or maybe they're just like coming to terms with the fact that they can have issues or problems or like serious things wrong with them that like they don't know if they should tell anyone. So when I went to the memorial and when I saw his high school friends all standing up there talking about him and talking about how they knew him, like, of course it did feel like they were talking about the same person, but there was like a part of me that felt like they don't know the same person I did. In late middle school, him and I talked about being depressed and being suicidal and being unable to sort of talk to anyone about that. It felt like when I was there at the memorial service, I felt like I knew things that other people maybe didn't. I don't know, it just felt like the understanding of him had shifted a little bit, or that like it was just completely different. The Jonny I knew was a beautiful golden human being who was complex and had issues, and felt like they didn't know that, or they were like more surprised than I was. When I got a text saying, "Did you hear what happened to Jonny?" I immediately knew what happened. You know, and I'd never have even known if anyone else has felt that way, which was why getting a text from you kind of really, really made me feel seen. I guess I don't really know how to express it, but I'm really grateful.
Yeah. Man, I feel like I feel like talking to you has just been like kind of affirming things that I felt were true, but I never knew. Because like I said, him and I stopped really communicating when he went to high school.
Yeah.
And like just the idea that I was not the only one that was lost in that transition time.
Absolutely not.
And the idea that like he talked about that darker side of him to other people. I mean, I think that's probably one of the reasons why your text that you read out just hit me the way that it did. Is you were verbalizing things that I wished I had been able to say, and I didn't really even know that that's what I wanted to say. And like truly that text and very specifically the Stay Golden like transformed the way that I remember Jonny.
There was no other way he was. He was always golden, and it's just like beautiful to think about.
Could you walk me through what you remember about that text and writing it?
I remember before I wrote that text, I went through my entire camera roll, finding every picture I had of him, saving it to an album, and then going to Instagram, screenshotting every single picture, because I was terrified that they would like take down his account and like take what memory there was of him away. and I screenshotted every text thread on whatever app it was of him after I found out. Just sort of like collecting my memories of him all in one place. Then I remember it was like pretty close to midnight, and I was just sitting in my bed not knowing what to do, probably crying, and I don't know, I sent it to his Instagram because I didn't really want anyone in his family reading what I sent to him, even though I did read it out loud at the damn memorial thing. But I sent the text just, maybe it would reach him.
Do you have the text?
Yeah, do you want me to read it?
That would be amazing.
I love you. I love you so much. I hope you see this. You're gone too soon. Such a golden part of my life. I enjoyed every fleeting second of the time I spent with you. And tough, tarnished by others, your life was golden too. I relate to you in more ways than you know, and you to me in more than I do. I wish I could have hugged you, or held you, even for 1 second longer. I saw you at Goodwill with your girlfriend, and I was too selfish and scared to say hi. I wish I did. I wish I did so bad. My eyes hurt. I love you. Stay gold, my friend. I hope I see you one day again. You were so much. So, so, so much. You beautiful man. You beautiful, funny, loving, gracious, careless, talented man. You'll love forever. I remember when I first met you at that summer camp at the reservoir. I've known you for so long. Highs and lows for 9 years. 9 years. Most of my life has been with you. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love you, I love you, I love you forever. Eli Hart. That's straight from my album of pictures, screenshotted from random parts of the internet of him.
That's another thing that I feel really sad about, is I had a flip phone for most of the time that I knew Jonny. And so I have no pictures of him, no videos, no texts. I specifically remember transferring my contacts over from my flip phone to my iPhone. And on my flip phone, he was Jonny. And then in my new iPhone, I put my man, Jonny. Like, that's my man Jonny. Oh man, I'm tearing up again. And when I look that up on messages, my man Jonny, there's nothing. Like, it's just blank. And like, it's one of those heartbreakingly poetic things. It so encapsulates those final years with Jonny, where like I still had so much respect for him and so much love for him. And yet it feels like our history there is blank because we just didn't communicate the way that we used to. But it's memories and texts like yours and everyone else I've talked to for this project that like made me feel a little bit better. Where it's like, I'm not the only secret keeper of Jonny.
I think like he opened up little parts of himself and showed us just how like beautiful he was, how deep he was to each and every one of us, just in like a subtly different way, and we all feel like we knew him so personally and so different from everyone else. And it like, I think it contributed to the pain we all felt when he passed, but it also just like enriches the memory, I guess.
At the end of the conversation, Eli mentioned to me that 21 Pilots is a band that always reminds him of Jonny. I cannot listen to 21 Pilots without tearing up. It was a middle school Jonny, apparently, that got his friends listening to the band, because no one else I talked to for this podcast associated him with 21 Pilots. And I asked. But I'm glad most people don't. We're all secret keepers of Jonny, even you, after listening to this podcast. And it's our job to keep these memories golden. Not just for Jonny, but for everyone who pops into your head when I say the word grief, or love, or laughter, or sadness. So let's all remember those golden people, together. And to my man Jonny, I love you, and don't ever forget it. A huge thank you to everyone who agreed to be interviewed for this project, and a huge thank you to those who helped over text. Thank you to Ella and Marissa, who both miraculously were able to give me a name, and the biggest thank you to Eli Hart, who agreed to the phone call that gave this podcast a conclusion. If you're struggling with suicidal ideation, please reach out to someone. The suicide hotline is 988, and a plethora of other options exist to help. You're not alone. Thank you for listening. This has been The Hunt for Gold.
Wish we could turn back time to the good old days when the mama said